boot scraped against the curb and dragged forward another inch. A child in the front row pointed and laughed. A woman behind a coffee cup shook her head and turned away. The crowd along the parade route began to hiss. Then a single boo rose from the corner near the courthouse. Another joined it. Then a wave. A paper cup arced through the cold November air and struck the old man on the shoulder. He did not flinch. He kept walking. His left leg dragged stiff behind him like a thing borrowed from another body. His faded green jacket hung loose at the chest. A row of small ribbons sat on the breast pocket, dulled by years of weather and washing. The mayor watched from the reviewing stand and signaled to a deputy. The man in the jacket was named Walter Briggs. "Stay with me on this one." The deputy lowered his radio and stepped off the platform. Walter Briggs did not look at him. Walter Briggs looked at the asphalt 3 feet ahead of his right boot. That was where his eyes lived now. 3 feet ahead. Always 3 feet ahead. He had learned that distance a long time ago in a place he never named. The crowd thickened as he passed the hardware store. A man in a red hat leaned over the barricade and shouted that he was a fraud. A woman with a stroller hissed the word liar. A teenager raised a phone and laughed into the lens. Walter Briggs kept walking. His right hand stayed flat against his thigh. His left hand held the cuff of his sleeve so it would not shake where people could see. The deputy moved at an angle through the crowd, pushing past elbows and shopping bags, eyes fixed on the green jacket. Behind the deputy, the high school band played a march that nobody listened to anymore. The drums kept the time of his limp. 1, 2, drag. 1, 2, drag. The boos had started 3 days earlier on a phone screen. A young man in another state had filmed a clip of Walter at the diner. He had zoomed in on the ribbons. He had written words across the top of the video. The words said, "This man is a thief of valor." The clip had moved through the town in less than a night. By morning, the diner waitress had stopped pouring his coffee. By afternoon, the barber had pretended not to see him through the window. By the second day, the post office clerk had pushed his pension envelope across the counter without looking up. Walter Briggs had said nothing to any of them. He had said nothing for 50 years about a great many things. He did not see why this one should be any different. He had put on the jacket that morning because his wife had asked him to. His wife had been gone for 11 years. He still kept her promises. At the corner of Main and Linden, the mayor lifted a small microphone. He cleared his throat in that careful way politicians clear throats. He said the parade committee wished to keep this a day of honor. He said certain individuals had been asked not to participate. He did not say a name. He did not need to. Every eye on the route turned to the green jacket. The deputy reached Walter Briggs at the edge of the curb. He set a soft hand on the old man's elbow. He said, "Sir, we are going to step over to the sidewalk now." Walter Briggs lifted his eyes from the asphalt for the first time. He looked at the deputy. The deputy was 26 years old. The deputy had a smooth face. The deputy had a sister who worked at the diner. Walter Briggs nodded once. He let himself be turned. That was the moment a horn cut through the band. Long, flat, military. Not a parade horn. Not a fire truck. Something deeper. The high school drummers stopped mid-beat. The crowd turned toward the south end of Main Street. A black SUV with tinted windows had nosed past the orange barricade. 2 more followed. They moved slow, but they did not stop. The lead driver tapped the horn 1 more time. The barricade officer stepped aside and raised a hand to his cap. The SUVs rolled to the curb 6 feet from where Walter Briggs and the deputy stood. The doors did not open right away. The crowd went quiet in that uneven way crowds go quiet, one mouth at a time. The mayor lowered his microphone. The deputy's hand fell off Walter's elbow. Walter Briggs lifted his eyes from the pavement and looked at the lead vehicle. The rear passenger door of the lead SUV opened. A polished black shoe came down onto the asphalt. Then a leg. Then a man. He was tall. He was square at the shoulders. He wore a dress uniform so dark it looked navy in the gray afternoon. 4 silver stars sat on each shoulder. Rows of color ran across his chest in tight, neat lines. A sword hung at his left hip in a black scabbard. He closed the door behind him with one quiet motion. He did not look at the mayor. He did not look at the crowd. He looked across the 6 feet of pavement at the old man in the faded jacket. The general's jaw moved once. His eyes did something that did not show in a photograph. He stepped forward. His shoes made a sound on the wet street. 1 step. 2. 3. He stopped 2 paces from Walter Briggs. The deputy took a step back without being told. The general spoke first. His voice was low. It carried anyway. He said, "Sergeant." Just that word. "Sergeant." Walter Briggs's right hand came up off his thigh in one slow motion. It found the brim of an invisible cap. It stopped there. The general's hand came up too. The fingertips of his right hand touched the edge of his service cap and stayed. He did not move. The crowd did not breathe. A flag 2 blocks away cracked once in the wind. The general held the salute. He did not lower it after the customary 2 seconds. He did not lower it after 5. He did not lower it after 10. The mayor stepped forward to say something, and then did not say anything. Somewhere behind the barricade, a woman began to cry without making any sound. The general's elbow stayed at a perfect right angle. Walter Briggs's elbow stayed at a perfect right angle. They held the salute for 43 seconds. The boos were gone. When the general finally lowered his hand, he did it slowly. Walter Briggs lowered his at the same speed. The general took one more step forward. He set his right hand on the old man's right shoulder. He turned his head just enough to look down the parade route. He looked at the mayor. He looked at the man in the red hat who had shouted fraud. He looked at the teenager with the phone. He spoke loud enough this time to be heard at the back of the crowd. He said, "You do not know who you have been booing today." He said, "You do not know what this man carried for you for 50 years. He said, "You are about to." Then he turned back to Walter Briggs and said softly, "With respect, Sergeant, if you will come with me, the country needs to ask your forgiveness in person." Walter Briggs nodded once. The drag in his left leg seemed less heavy. The general walked beside him toward the SUV. He did not walk ahead. He matched the limp step for step. A young aide in the second vehicle came around with a folder under his arm. The folder was black and stiff and bound at the spine. A red stripe ran along its edge. 3 letters were stamped into the corner. The aide did not show it to anyone. He held it close to his chest. The crowd watched the folder the way they had watched the salute. They understood without being told that the folder was the answer to a question they had not known they were asking. The mayor stepped down from the reviewing stand and walked toward the curb with his hat in his hands. He did not speak. He stopped at the barricade and waited. Inside the SUV, Walter Briggs sat in the rear seat next to the general. The door closed and the world outside went muffled. The general did not speak for a long moment. The aide in the front passenger seat half turned and offered the folder. The general took it but did not open it. He set it on his own knee. He looked at Walter Briggs. He said, "I have wanted to find you for 31 years. He said, "I tried in 88. He said, "I tried in 94. He said the file was sealed every time. He said 2 weeks ago a clerk in Maryland made a phone call to the right office and the seal came off. He said, when I saw the video of the parade this morning, I had my driver in the car in 9 minutes." Walter Briggs did not answer. His eyes had gone back to a spot 3 feet ahead. The general waited. The general was very good at waiting. The general opened the folder. Inside the front cover was a single black and white photograph. It showed a younger man in jungle fatigues, crouched beside a wounded soldier, a radio handset pressed to his cheek. The wounded soldier in the photograph was a captain. The crouching radio operator was Walter Briggs at 23 years old. The general turned the photograph so Walter could see it. He said, "The captain in this picture is my father." He said, "You carried him 4 miles after the ambush." He said, "You carried him through a river that the maps did not show." He said, "The rescue helicopter logged the pickup at 0420 hours." He said, "My father lived another 41 years because of those 4 miles." Walter Briggs did not look at the photograph. He looked at the general's face. He said quietly, with that voice that had not used many words in many years, he said, "Your father told you about that night." The general said no. He said, "My father never said one word about that night, not to me, not to my mother, not to anyone." He said, "But he kept a letter in a locked drawer." He said the letter was from the sergeant who carried him. He said the letter asked the captain to never speak the sergeant's name aloud because the mission had not happened. He said, "My father kept that promise until the day he died." He said, "You kept it longer." Walter Briggs lowered his eyes. He said he was a good man. The general said, "You are also a good man." Walter Briggs did not answer that. Outside the SUV, the crowd had not moved. The barricade officer had radioed for the parade to hold. The high school band sat in 2 long lines on the courthouse steps, their instruments in their laps. The mayor stood with his hat in both hands and looked at the closed SUV door. The deputy stood beside the mayor. The deputy was thinking about his sister at the diner. The teenager with the phone had lowered the phone and was looking at it like he did not recognize the thing in his hand. The man in the red hat had taken the hat off. He held it pressed flat against his chest. He was not sure when he had done that. He was not sure why his eyes were wet. The wind moved the leaves on Linden Street. A church bell 2 blocks over rang the half hour. Nobody on Main Street spoke. If you are still walking this parade route with me, hit that subscribe button. I want you to hear what the general said when he stepped back out of that car. The SUV door opened again 4 minutes later. The general stepped out first. He turned and offered his hand. Walter Briggs took it and stood. The black folder stayed open in the general's other hand. The general walked Walter Briggs to the center of the street, into the empty space between the barricades, where the parade should have been passing. He nodded to his aide. The aide brought a small portable microphone on a thin black stand and set it in front of the general. The general did not step behind the microphone. He turned it so it faced him. He kept his hand on Walter Briggs's elbow. He looked out at the crowd. The crowd looked back. The mayor stood at the barricade with his hat still in his hands. The general lifted the folder. He did not read from it. He spoke from memory. He said in the spring of 1972, a long-range reconnaissance team of 6 men was inserted into a place that, according to every official document, did not exist. He said 5 of those men did not come back. He said the 6th man came back, carrying the body of his commanding officer for 4 miles through terrain that should not have been crossable by a man who was not bleeding. He said the 6th man was also bleeding. He said he was bleeding from a wound in his left leg that he never had repaired beyond a field stitch because the mission, officially, had never happened, and a hospital record would have ended his career and his country's plausible deniability. He said for 51 years this 6th man has limped through his life without a single medal he was actually owed, without a single news article, without a single thank you from a town or a state or a country, because the file was stamped a word I will not say here today. He said the file is unsealed now. He said the 6th man's name is Walter Briggs. He said Walter Briggs is the reason my father came home in 1972. He said Walter Briggs is the reason a great many fathers came home in 1972, whose families will never know to thank him. He said Walter Briggs did not steal valor. He said you, the people of this town, have today been booing a man whose chest, if it carried every ribbon he earned, would not have room for them all. The man in the red hat slid down to one knee on the wet curb. He did not seem to know he had done it. A woman pressed both hands over her mouth and did not move them. The teenager with the phone began to cry openly and did not lift the phone again. The deputy turned his face away because he did not want anyone to see what his face was doing. Walter Briggs looked at the asphalt 3 feet ahead of his right boot. He looked there for a long time. The general did not rush him. The crowd did not rush him. A pigeon landed near the curb and was ignored. Walter Briggs finally lifted his eyes. He did not look angry. He did not look proud. He looked tired in the way a man looks tired when he has been holding a weight that he is finally allowed to set down. He nodded once at the crowd. He did not say anything yet. The general spoke once more, very quietly, only to Walter Briggs. He said, "Sergeant, you do not owe them a word." Walter Briggs nodded again. Then he stepped to the microphone. He said, "I was 23 years old. He said my captain told me to leave him. He said I did not leave him. He said that is the whole story. He said the rest is what other men did, and most of those men are gone now, and I would rather not say their names today in case any part of what we did is still not supposed to be said. He said I came home, and I went to work at the lumberyard. He said I married a woman who knew not to ask. He said she is gone now too. He said I have lived in this town for 48 years. He said most of you have been kind to me most of those years. He said I do not blame anyone for the last 3 days. He said a video on a telephone is a fast thing, and a quiet old man is a slow thing. He said I would have believed it too." He paused. He looked at the man in the red hat on his knee. He said, "Son, please stand up." The man in the red hat stood up. Walter Briggs said, "I forgive you." He said it once. He did not say it again because he did not need to. The man in the red hat covered his face. The mayor stepped out from the barricade and walked across the empty street with his hat in his hands. He stopped 4 feet from Walter Briggs. He tried to speak twice and could not. The general did not help him. The crowd did not help him. The mayor finally said, "Sir, I asked them to take you off this parade." He said, "I am the one who said the word." He said, "I did not know." He said, "That is not an excuse." He said, "I am asking you to forgive a man who did not deserve to be on this stand today." Walter Briggs looked at the mayor for a long, quiet moment. He said, "You were doing what you thought your job was." He said, "That is more than most men do." He said, "Yes." He said, "I forgive you." He said, "Now please ask the band to play." He said, "It is cold, and these children have been holding their instruments a long time." The mayor turned to the courthouse steps. He waved a slow hand. The band director, a young woman in a wool coat, lifted her baton. The drums began first. Not the march they had been playing earlier. Something slower. Something the older people in the crowd knew the words to without being told. The trumpets came in next. Then the rest. The general turned to Walter Briggs and held out his arm. Walter Briggs took it. They walked the rest of the parade route together. The general matched the limp step for step. The 4-star did not look once at the mayor or the crowd. He looked only at the asphalt 3 feet ahead of Walter Briggs's right boot. He stayed in that distance with him. People along the route who had booed an hour earlier now stood with their right hands flat over their hearts. Children who had laughed now watched silent from their father's shoulders. The man in the red hat walked along the inside of the barricade and did not let Walter Briggs out of his sight, the way a man walks beside a thing he is trying to memorize. At the end of the route, near the old train depot, a folding chair had been set out by somebody who knew what was coming. Walter Briggs sat down on it slowly. The general stood beside the chair. The aide brought the black folder forward and laid it on Walter Briggs's lap. Inside the back cover were 3 small flat boxes. The general opened them one at a time. He did not put the medals on Walter Briggs's jacket because that, he said, was a thing the country should do in a ceremony in Washington when Walter Briggs felt able to travel. He said, "For today, Sergeant, please just know that they exist and that they belong to you." Walter Briggs looked at the 3 small boxes on his lap and did not touch them. He said, "Thank you." He said, "That is enough for today." The general nodded. The aide closed the folder. The general bent down so his face was level with Walter Briggs's face. He said, "My father said to tell you, if I ever found you, that he was sorry he could not say your name. He said my father said to tell you that he said it every night for 41 years in a room where nobody could hear. He said my father said to tell you that he saw you in his dreams and you were always carrying him." Walter Briggs's eyes filled. He did not let the water move down his face. He said, "Tell him I made it home." He said, "Tell him I made it home, and I am tired now." The general said, "Yes, Sergeant." He said, "I will tell him." The sun was going behind the courthouse by then. The light along Main Street had turned the color of old brass. The general stepped back. He came to attention. He saluted Walter Briggs one more time. He held it for 10 seconds this time. He lowered his hand and turned and walked back to the SUV. The aide closed the door behind him. The SUVs pulled away slowly. The crowd parted to let them pass. Walter Briggs sat on the folding chair near the depot for a long time. People came up to him one at a time, the way people come up to a casket. They did not say much. Some of them only put a hand on his shoulder. Some of them only nodded. The diner waitress walked up and set a paper cup of coffee on the curb beside his chair. She did not look at him. She walked away before he could thank her. The barber came next and stood for a full minute and could not find words. The post office clerk came after that and laid the day's pension envelope on his lap and walked away without it. Walter Briggs let it sit there. The mayor came last. He had put his hat back on his head. He stood in front of the chair and did not speak. Walter Briggs looked up at him and said, "You were doing your job." He said it again, gently, the way a man says a thing he wants another man to be able to live with. The mayor nodded. He said, "Sir, with your permission, we would like to put your name on the courthouse lawn." He said, "Next to the names of the others." He said, "We should have done it 50 years ago." Walter Briggs said no. He said, "Please do not put my name there." He said, "Put a bench there." He said, "Make it a plain bench." He said, "Make it so an old man can sit down on it when his leg is tired." He said, "Do not put a plaque." He said, "The people who need to know will know." The mayor said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Yes, sir," twice. He said it like a son says it. He took his hat off again and held it in both hands. By the time the streetlights came on, only the deputy was still with him. The deputy had brought a second folding chair and sat beside him without asking. They did not speak. The deputy's sister came down from the diner at 6 o'clock and brought a plate of meatloaf wrapped in foil. She did not say anything either. She set the plate on Walter Briggs's lap and kissed the top of his head and walked back up the street. Walter Briggs watched her go. He said to the deputy, "Your sister was always a good girl." The deputy nodded. The deputy could not speak. Walter Briggs ate slowly. The deputy waited. When Walter Briggs was finished, the deputy stood and offered his arm. Walter Briggs took it. They walked together the 4 blocks home. The drag in the left leg was the same drag it had always been. The boots scraped the curb the same way. But the man inside the green jacket walked easier somehow. He walked like a man who had finally been allowed to set something down on the side of the road and keep going without it. At his front porch, he turned and looked at the deputy. He said, "Son." He said, "Thank you for walking me home." He said, "Tell your sister the meatloaf was the best she ever made." He went inside. He closed the door softly. The porch light stayed on a long time. Somewhere down Main Street, the church bell rang 7. The town of Linden, on a cold November evening, in the year nobody in that town would ever forget, went quietly to sleep around the green jacket that had walked among them for 48 years without ever once asking to be thanked.